Next, the breaking news out of Afghanistan. 4 Americans are now safe after escaping the country over a land border. The State Department confirming it helped in the evacuation.
Tonight, the US confirming 4 more American citizens are now safely out of Afghanistan after a daring escape by land. A week after the last American troops left the country under the cover of night, a senior State Department official says the US helped those citizens make it across a land border and into a neighbouring country. US Embassy staff at that border describing the Americans as in good condition and saying the Taliban were aware of the crossing and did not impede their transit.
And it's a bold-faced lie when they're out there saying that this was a successful evacuation, this was a successful mission, when, Rachel, the truth is, I wouldn't be there if it was successful, and other organizations wouldn't be there, and the Sentinel Foundation wouldn't be there if it was successful. And then when we worked for literally 48 almost around-the-clock hours trying to negotiate with the Taliban to release Miriam to be able to come across the bridge, and then Blinken puts out a statement that says that the Taliban was helpful and released them. I will tell you, at 3 o'clock yesterday morning, Central Standard Time, at 3 o'clock yesterday morning, they had threatened to kill her because I was on the phone with her, and they had threatened to kill her if she approached the checkpoint again.
Right.
And that doesn't sound like they're working with us.
No.
But Blinken, he goes out there and wants to take credit for it. And it infuriates me because they continue to lie to the American people.
State Department says it has gotten about 4 American citizens out of the country via a land route. They said that was facilitated in part by the Taliban, that embassy staff met those Americans as they crossed over into the U.S. embassy. And so highlighting this as part of the efforts that continue from the administration to get out those remaining Americans.
And he says, I can't assist you. I can't help you. Why? I was told not to. You were told not to help an American citizen. You were told by the federal government in Washington, D.C., not to help. When we're not trying to smuggle anybody over, we're trying to do a job that President Biden wouldn't do.
Meanwhile, at a North Afghanistan airport, the rush to leave continues, even after US forces have departed.
Well, it's grim, quite candidly. They were in good spirits when they went up there a couple of days ago, but now, like I said, they have had to switch locations because they were in danger.
Paul Stern, who works for a US-based charity which focuses on the empowerment of young women, is actively trying to get Afghan girls out of the country. These satellite photos reportedly showing chartered planes at Mazar al-Sharif airport waiting to take off, but being blocked by the Taliban. A top Republican telling Fox the Taliban is holding Americans.
6 airplanes with American citizens on them as I speak, and the Taliban is holding them hostage for demands right now.
They had been a political football where they weren't allowed to go at first, and now they're basically being held at ransom by the Taliban.
And the State Department is not confirming there are Americans on those planes, saying yesterday, we will hold the Taliban to its pledge to let people freely depart Afghanistan.
We had multiple ambassadors that we spoke to that had told us when we were trying to arrange what we call rat lines, because with these same people we try to get out to Hakaya and we couldn't get the State Department to open the gate. We tried on the 28th, the 29th, and the 30th multiple times, and when they said that anybody that wanted to leave could leave, that's not true, because you had to go through 3 Taliban checkpoints, and each one of them would charge between $500 to $1,000 a person to cross those checkpoints. So that's why the other countries was going out and getting their citizens and bringing them back, but not the United States, but at the orders from either Secretary Blinken or President Biden. And so when we started trying to find other places to take them out of through other countries and set up rat lines, which we have been successful doing, we have right now 23 other U.S. citizens, AMSETs, in safe houses in different locations outside of Kabul that are waiting to get out too. When we started trying to find and work with embassies around there, they told us, they said, Mr. Mullen or Rep Mullen, we have been instructed not to assist you in any way. Now, this is embassies telling me that Washington, D.C. told them not to assist us in any way.
Bear in mind, all 3 of her children, they were born and raised here in America. They don't speak Dari. They don't speak Pashto. So that really makes them a key target when they're questioned at certain Taliban checkpoints within Kabul and also outside of the country. So again, we had our team together. We were going to go in and basically support the operations. And that's when the State Department in D.C. and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and others started to try and thwart our efforts.
And part of that, Corey, I understand that you tried to airlift them out. What happened there? You were told you couldn't land, and what was the reason given to you for that?
So we originally wanted to bring in, we had an aircraft, we had the approved PPR from the actual runway, we had the approved FAA flyovers, were even designated as a humanitarian emergency aircraft, which meant that even though it only had 18 or 19 seats, we could fill it to the weight capacity. So that means we could have pulled out roughly 24, 25 Americans. As we were about 9,000 feet off the deck, we had landing gear down on descent. We were told to go or do a go-around. And at that point, we were told that our PPR has now been disapproved. We applied in the air through our contacts and networks. We were approved for, 3-4 more PPRs, and immediately they were denied. I told the pilot to go ahead and land, and he was willing to do so, at which point an F-16 actually flew over the top of us, and that was their warning of interception. Now, this is a in-November number tail, which means it's an American aircraft. That's what it was very obvious. The next thing that was told is that unless General Milley has approved this landing, that you're not landing. We rebutted again through the cockpit and even tried to explain what our situation was. They told us that the reason you're being denied is because your aircraft isn't large enough. Now, keep in mind, Ryan, if you're given a PPR, that means that you've already given a landing slot. That means there's no other aircraft that was coming in place of your landing slot, which means that they just vacated a landing slot because they didn't want us to land because we were a civilian aircraft there to basically help Americans. So I had Miriam, her family, as well as for other AMCITs, which we call American citizens, that were waiting on this to include a woman who was sitting at the gate with her father, and they waved us off. Hours later, the Abbey Gate was hit with an explosion, and we never heard from one of those American citizens again after that. We assume and believe that she perished.
We left the United States. We had a time of arrival at Hakaya in Kabul. Hakaya is the airport there in Kabul. And we got there and we were on approach, and they canceled our PPR. And so we circled the airport probably for an hour, and we had 5 PPRs canceled. Every time they'd cancel, the agency that was trying to get us in would give us a new one. They actually went into the tower to say, let them land. We were on the phone with them texting. We couldn't talk. We were texting back and forth, and they kept issuing us new ones. And they would never let us in Afghanistan. And I'll tell you this, too. Unfortunately, one of our American citizens, her 2-year-old son, and I believe it was her father, to which I all have passports on, we lost contact of because they were at the Abbey Gate. And a few hours later, the Abbey Gate blew up. And we haven't had any contact with them since, and I believe it's because they were caught up in that. And so what they did by playing politics on this, for whatever reason.
So you don't know who shut you down from landing?
I don't know I don't know who shut us down, but I think it was 100% directed from the State Department.
The U.S. State Department said U.S. officials had facilitated this rescue operation. What is your response to that?
It's a very far cry and exaggeration. We took this thing to the 99th yard. We evacuated her to my safe house in Kabul, as well as for others. We sheltered them in place. We then did an early night move, 13 hours out to Mazar-e-Sharif, where they were actually having some flights going out. The State Department offered no support to that. We manifested her on 6 different flights. On one of the flights that she was actually getting ready to board that had been approved by the DOD, been approved by the DOS, been approved by the Taliban, 30 minutes before they were getting ready to go on board, the State Department revoked their approval, and the excuse they used is they needed to vet the manifest. That basically kept that aircraft on the ground, and at that point, the mullah who's in the area, Hamza, he basically said no more flights are going out right now. So we then had to be forced to shelter in place for a couple more days until we could find a safe crossing, a safe passing. We could do our recce's to recon the actual boarding site, look at what kind of local support we could solicit. And at that stage, when we saw that it was ready to move, we had to move her all the way across to that border crossing point where we collected her and safely brought her across, but only after we had to negotiate with the Malawis, which is the Taliban commanders, to get her across, because I have recordings where literally the Taliban commander in Dari is saying, we have no agreement with the Americans, we have no coordination with the Americans to allow or facilitate you to come across our borders. This idea that Biden is saying that we have coordination with the Taliban, we didn't see that at all.
What do you think when you hear the estimates 100 are left? Is that accurate?
I definitely think that it's far more than that. I think you're probably looking more at 300 or more. You know, we have 24 more just on our list alone. So if we have 24 more, you have to assume that there's quite a reach that we don't have access to. Again, we should have left by the principles of never leave another American behind. I mean, that's why, you know, I suspended my campaign. I'm actually running for Congress in the 7th District of Florida right there in Orlando. And I suspended my campaign temporarily until I could come back, because I believe in the idea that we need to preserve and we need to protect and we need to prioritize every single American life.